does exist. It took a long time in the making. Yes, I am indeed all of those things, and I enjoyed being able to drive up here and be with you today for this really important year of Peru. I'm so glad you're doing this, because I think we don't learn enough about South America, Central America, and it's a very important part of the world. The Andes of South America were one of the 6 cradles of civilization. In other words, places that did not receive influences from other parts of the world in order to come up with sophisticated civilizations. The anthropologists call these pristine civilizations. So it's on a par with Mesopotamia in China and the Nile. And in fact, Mesoamerica, ancient Mexico, is one of the other of the 6 cradles of civilization. So we've sadly neglected them, and I think this is going on a good way towards redressing that. I do want to represent the Carlos Museum because it's only a 35-minute drive from you all, and we have over 500 pieces of art from the ancient Americas on view, of which about 150 of them are from ancient Peru. So right here in your backyard, you can see some of the pieces I'll show you today are from that collection, and there's many more, and we have 1,500 in the storerooms. You can do original research. If you wanted to come and do an internship at Emory and get credit, you can do original research on real works of art. So this is an opportunity that we like to share with all of Atlanta. Now, it's important to know that the present is always based on the past. So what I am showing you here is a shaman from Peru. He's no longer with us. His name is Don Eduardo Calderon. Don is an honorific title of Sir, or a great person. So it's kind of like we call shamans Don or Doña because they are elevated in importance in the society. And that's an ancient moche piece. I wish it were at the Carlos. It's at the Harvard Peabody Museum of Archaeology. So then and now, I put the now on the left and the then on the right, kind of confuse you, because the past and the present are interrelated with one another. Now, by the same token, we don't want to sentimentalize or primitivize places like Peru and say they haven't changed. Nothing has changed. We're in an ever-present, past of idyllic, wandering peoples, because it's a modern country, and I'm sure you've looked at things about the modern country. What's so interesting is that the past and the present can interdigitate, and they do very strongly in a place like Peru. Millions and millions of people still speak Quechua and Aymara, the ancient languages that were even spoken Aymara probably before the Inca, Quechua by the Inca. There are still ancient cities. You go out of Trujillo, and you're in the ancient city of Tancan. It's right there. So we don't have that opportunity here. In our country, unless you go to Mesa Verde, or I was in Chaco Canyon this weekend, unless you go to a few places, you're not really next to an ancient city. So that's true in Peru. There are lots of ancient cities, not just Machu Picchu. And there are still people like Eduardo and many other shamans that are practicing the same basic spiritual beliefs as people from very, very long ago. And when I say very, very long ago, I'm going to take us back to the peopling of the world. Just to remind you that we all started in Africa, but after Africa, coming across Asia, the Native Americans came across where this crease in the page is. Very important crease in the page. So I put another map that shows you the Bering Strait, and this lighter green area is what the Bering Strait used to be. It was 1,000 miles across. It wasn't a little bridge that they were tripping across paying a toll. It was just walking along from Asia, and suddenly they're in a different part of the world. Now this land bridge got submerged 10,000 years ago by the seas rising. So it's still there, just under the water. So we just do have to remember that the people from the Americas are Asian in their basis. And what's important to us today is that the heartland of shamanism is right where the people came from as they were beginning to cross the land bridge 10,000 years ago, right up here in what we now call Siberia, the Tungus region. We know that this is true because genetically, Native Americans are the closest to the Siberian people from the Tungus area. in their genes, in their body. And National Geographic just reproved this in 2006. So there's no doubt. So when they came over, one of the things they brought with them was the dog. We're not talking about dogs today, though. And the other thing they brought over with them is a shamanic religious stance. Now, shamanism is the oldest world religious complex. It's not an institutionalized religion. An institutionalized religion is one that has some kind of a written down, permanent record of stories and ideas. An institutionalized religion has a type of building that you meet in, call it a temple or a mosque or a cathedral or whatever. And it has a set hierarchy of individuals and roles that you ascend to. And it usually has a liturgy, something that you say over and over again. Shamanism doesn't have those things. That doesn't mean that it's not a religious complex. So the anthropologists call it a religious complex because it is an orientation toward the spiritual. And it is a set of practices that have been maintained for probably 30,000 years. Probably 30,000 years. It's the basis of all the institutionalized religions. Sociologists of religion say that it underlies all the other religions because it's based on charismatic people who have a direct connection to what they consider the divine. That's the shaman. The shaman is an intermediary, a man or a woman who is an intermediary, a conduit. And in fact, one of the most important things is that the shaman goes into plants. And they are in an altered state of consciousness. What I'm showing you here is a map that connects up. There's where the Bering Strait was. It connects up plants. This happens to be sacred plants which give you visions. So here in the Siberian region, fly agaric is a type of mushroom. And it actually occurs also over in the Americas. So one of the things that the people, besides the dog, and this basic idea, one of the things they might have brought with them was a sacred plant that came over into the Americas. And here is a Mongolian shaman. I don't know if you know if it's in his focus. Can you see that his eyes are rolled back in his head? You're just seeing the whites of his eyes. He is in trance, and he is fighting with other beings that we can't see, but he can. So that's from the heartland of Asia where shamanism comes from. Here's Don Eduardo, when he is picking a very potent plant called Datura, which is a very dangerous poison and also happens to give you vision. We'll stop right here. These aren't drugs. We're looking from the Native American point of view. Sacred plants that give you visions are not drugs. They are not recreational. They are not fun. They are not casual. They're not unethical or illegal, which are all the things that we categorize as drugs in our culture. So I am not here to tell you to take Datura. You can die from Datura, so please don't. It's an ornamental plant. You can find it here in Georgia, these bell-shaped leaves. So don't go around licking and touching the plants, okay? I am also not speaking from personal experience when I talk about visions. That's always the first question. Woo! What did you do when you were down in Peru? And I'm frightened of these things. These are very, very powerful and very special experiences. So that's another reason that they're not drugs. So we have to really make a distinction. What shamans tell us they are plant teachers. They are teaching. They have wisdom in them. Don Eduardo would risk his life to experience Datura because he felt that it had wisdom in it. That where he went on his trance visions had a purpose. So it's not just, let's see what happens. The purpose is to come back with information from other realms of the cosmos. And he felt like the plants were the teachers, just like me standing here giving you a lecture about them. I worked with a shaman in Ecuador, so one country over from Peru. Hope that counts. And he told me, this plant doesn't give me visions. He looked at me like I was crazy. I said, well, does this, you take this and this, you put it together, and you have visions? No. The plant opens me up. It doesn't give me anything. So this is very different. Don't you think? We think about the synapses in your brain and the chemistry of your brain and the brain waves and all these kinds of mechanical things. He said, no, it doesn't have anything to do with that. So basically, in our terms, it would be a catalyst, something that makes something else happen, but not something that does it in and of itself. That's an important distinction. That's why these are also sacred, because they're not just changing your head around and making you feel funny. They are leading you towards something important. So Don Eduardo would talk. He was a wonderful informant. He was a very articulate man. He was an artist. He had helped on the restoring the city of Chanchan, the ancient city near Trujillo. He was a Renaissance man. And he talked about this attitude toward vision. Now, to contrast this, let me read you what the Spanish said about the ancient people. This is Friar Bernabé Cobo. He wrote about the Inca, which were the last people, the Inca religion. He said, the Indians of Peru were so idolatrous that they worshipped as gods almost everything created. Since they did not have supernatural insights, they fell into the same errors and folly as the other nations of pagans. Upon finding fertile ground in the simple-mindedness and ignorance of these barbarians, the devil reigned over them for many centuries until the power of the cross started stripping him of his authority. Now, whether we're Christian or not doesn't matter. What matters is that the attitude towards shamanism was that it was of the devil. And it's kind of similar to us, thinking that it's kind of bad to take these plant features and have vision. There's a sort of a, ooh, that's not good. We've got to take that and put that aside, because the visions that come from it, that's what my whole new book is about. These visions have specific properties that we can find in the ancient art, that we find embodied in the ancient art, and that connects the past and the present. So what Eduardo said to his anthropologist, who was a man named Douglas Sharon, and what we find in the ancient art, I argue we can find commonalities, and that's the continuity of shamanism over time. So my definition, my working definition of shamanism is that a special intermediary goes into altered consciousness and communicates with spiritual beings in order to bring back information and cure. It's heavily involved with curing, whether it's a physical ailment or a societal problem or a lack of game, some kind of survival issue, fertility. Shamans are very concerned with keeping fertility still. So that, and in the Americas, almost all of shamanism revolves around using sacred plants. Not all of it. You can achieve the exact same effects by staying up for several nights, not eating, cutting yourself and bleeding and going into shock, dancing for a long period of time, drumming for a long period of time. Many, many ways, the exact same, scientifically, the exact same brain waves and the exact same perceptual effects will happen. So, and also, on the flip side, if all of us in this room drank a brew called ayahuasca, several of you would not see anything. It would not have any effect on you. So in shamanic cultures, the plant, again, is either teaching you or it's not. What if I walked out and I didn't talk anymore? That would be the equivalent. The plant decides. That's one way to look at it. We would say, well, you're so against it that you won't let it happen, or there's just something different in your brain chemistry. In shamanic society, you're not meant to have any vision. So it has to do with the plant, not you. And it actually has to do with the spirit of the plant that's not shining down on you. So here's some pictures of Eduardo. Here he is taking pilgrims on a pilgrimage to sacred lagoons, because Shamans get their power from the earth. The earth is alive. Not just the plants that come out of it, but the lagoons, the water has spirits in it. This shaman that I worked with in Ecuador, he would look down in a pool and he would see a being. He would look into a rock and he would see the spirit of the rock. So when they go on their pilgrimages, they go not to, it's interesting, kind of like Lourdes, isn't it? The sacred waters, the healing waters. They're coming up out of the mountain. Up here on the top left is sort of a black and white picture, but he has a sword, and he's fighting. He's like the Mongolian shaman that's fighting other spirits. So the shaman, when they're in their trance, may be fighting the disease, or maybe fighting the malevolent neighbors that are messing you up, or fighting in some way. So that's him being aggressive. And on the top right, he is talking to the four directions. That's all through everything Native American and most of the rest of the world. You talk to the four directions before you do anything. He called them the four winds, the winds that came from the different directions. So these are ritual gestures, and these gestures have been taking place since time immemorial. I'm not going to go into this today, but there's ancient images that look like they're warfare, but the people are transformed. They have animal heads, and they have wings, and it's not just a regular war. So there's spiritual warfare, and there are definitely pilgrimages, all from ancient time, walking the mountains, walking hundreds of miles from here to there for special reasons. And the four directions are very important in all times. So we have many similarities. And this is Eduardo's mesa. Mesa is Spanish for table. Most people translate it as altar, but really, it's not a really good translation. A lot of times the Spanish word for it doesn't quite get at the meaning of the thing for the shaman. This is Eduardo, sitting behind a series. There's his sword that he uses to fight spirits, and these are various staffs that are carved. See this one that's like wiggling like a snake? And there are ones with owls and different powers. And then on this, it's really just a piece of cloth that creates a mesa. So it doesn't have to be elevated, and you're not worshiping in front of it. It's a very active set of objects that basically come to life and channel spirits during the ritual, the healing ritual. And there's a whole book on his mesa if you're interested in how it was set up. It's really fascinating. On the left side were ancient objects. Some of them he found at the ancient city of Chanchan. He felt they had powers in them. On the right side was Christian imagery, because he was a good Catholic. And in the middle were some images of San Cipriano, St. Cyprian. Has anyone ever heard of St. Cyprian? No, it's kind of obscure, but he was a man who had been sort of an evil shaman, trying to manipulate people with love magic. And he was converted by the Virgin Mary into being Catholic and became a saint. So he bridged the world, and he's an interesting figure. If any of you went to the lecture by Jessica Stevenson about the spaces in between and the thresholds, St. Cyprian stands right on the threshold between shamanism and Catholicism, because you can see him as the bad primitive shaman who became the good Catholic, or you can see the equivalence between the two worlds, that they're basically even with one another. And he stands right in the middle, someone who combines the two worlds. Shamanism is very good at what's called syncretism, when religions come together and blend. Syncretism, because shamanism doesn't care if you go to church on Sunday, as long as you do your curing ritual Saturday night. It doesn't matter if you pray to the Virgin Mary, as long as you go to the lagoon first. So it combines. It's almost like a religion without an ego. Sort of says, okay, they're all spirits. I was in Ecuador again, and another shaman who had a shrine to Jesus on his wall. And the students I was with from memory said, why does he have the shrine to Jesus? And I said, well, ask him. And they asked him, and he said, Jesus is a very powerful spirit. You can't do any work without Jesus. So he They were incorporated, and that's basically you could say that. If you were a Christian, it is a very important and powerful spirit in your life. So the two can combine together. They are not mutually exclusive, because shamanism is an attitude. And in fact, that particular shaman did not use the plant teachers and did his curing during the day. So, anyway, back to Eduardo. These staffs would vibrate. When he started to do a ritual, everyone around would see them. A particular one would start to vibrate, and he would know that that was the one that he needed to use. And it might be the owl staff, or it might have a bird part or another type of animal. And when it vibrated, then he took it and did what he was led to do while he was under the influence of the plant teachers. Another good word for plant teachers that I'd like to bring to you, because the word hallucinogen has all of our drug category in it, so we don't like that word anymore. Too much baggage. No wheels on the baggage. The good word to substitute is entheogen. E-N. T-H. E-O-G-E-N. E-N-T-H-E-O-G-E-N. Entheogen. Theo is always the divine, theology, God, something good and positive. And N and Gen are from engender. Whatever engenders the divine. Whatever connects you to the divine. So some people dance around in a circle. The Sufis dance all night in a circle. That's an entheogen to them, an entheogenic action. Some people drink a drink that's made out of a vine. That's an entheogenic substance. Some people go down on their knees for long periods of time. That's an entheogenic act. But it's a nice neutral term because it doesn't say what is the right way to get to the divine. And hopefully we are multicultural enough that we don't think there's just one way. So entheogen. This oil can contains entheogen. It was a brew made out of a cactus. I'll show it to you in a little bit. It's now called the San Pedro cactus. That's a great syncretism, isn't it? St. Peter holds the keys to heaven. The San Pedro cactus opens the portal to the other side. So, and it's a modern can. He's got some Pre-Columbian artifacts, and he has some crosses, and he's carved some stabs. It's got about 10 centuries of different things that have been gathered together on a piece of cloth that he uses when he is in trance to talk to the spirit. Jesus, Cyprian, etc. So this is a wonderful guy who was able to talk, and there's a book that's written in English and in Spanish. It's a translation of everything that he said one night. It's called Eduardo el Curandero. Eduardo the Curer. And if you're really interested in the words and the actions and how he taught, I would read that book. There are other modern people, modern shamans who are also artists that are really useful in understanding what shamanism is like now. And then we will use it to go back and see what the art looked like back in the ancient times. This is a man who died in the fall of 2009 named Pablo Amaringo. He's got a beautiful book. If you're interested, please, with about 50 of his paintings and the translation of the visions, because each one is a kind of a summary of the visions that he had. It's called ayahuasca visions. Ayahuasca is spelled A-Y-A-H-U-A S-A-A. Ayahuasca. Did I say that right? H-U-A-S-A-A. Okay. I wish I had a board. Ayahuasca Visions, Pablo Amaringo, and a guy named Eduardo Luna for Moon. This is one of his grand paintings that he did. He was a shaman first, and then he stopped curing, and he became an artist. And he actually has founded a school in the Amazon, in the far northeast corner of Peru, teaching people painting. And he dropped his shamanic role, but his paintings were of the visions that he had had. 10, 15, 20, 30 years earlier. Visions are very memorable. There's something about the brain that makes you remember them. They did some scientific experiments. There was someone who had a 6-hour visionary experience and wrote a 40-page document about it. Weeks later, everything that happened, 40 pages. That's worse than your term paper. So, very memorable. And what this one is showing is two snakes. Can you see this big, colorful snake? And this giant boa constrictor that wiggles around down here. There's still parts of it down here. So these are two snakes that represent the spirit of the two plants that are mixed together to make ayahuasca, which is one of the main plant teachers of this area. So this is Pablo Amaringo's description of his painting. Out of the ayahuasca vine comes a black snake with yellow, orange, and blue spots, surrounded by a yellow aura. There is also another snake, the chacruna snake, of bright and luminous colors. From its mouth comes a violet radiation surrounded by blue rays. The chacruna snake penetrates the ayahuasca snake, producing the visionary effect of these two magic plants. You know that chacruna is a plant called Psychotria viridis, and you have to mix it together with a vine. He's calling the vine ayahuasca, but the vine is Banisteriopsis caapi. I really need to just call it caapi. C-A-A-P-I. C-A-A-P-I. Shorthand. Caapi. If you don't mix these two together, neither one of them will give you visions. So out of the tens of thousands of species in the jungle, at some point, long ago, people figured out, boil this vine and add these leaves, and you will get visions which are not dangerous and will never kill you. How did they do that? They were just differently motivated. Now, the shamans say that the plants themselves told them to do it. And if you want to read a book that will blow your mind, The Cosmic Serpent, by a man named Jeremy Narby, N-A-R-B-Y, The Cosmic Serpent. He talks about how a way in scientific reasoning that the plants could have told the shamans how to mix them together. The guy lost his academic position for writing this book. Because our worldview doesn't like this. But just read it. It's a short book. Read it and call me later. Anyway, this is the representation of the snakes, which are the spirit of the plant. The caapi vine, which is what he's calling ayahuasca, is all up here, this twisted tree-like thing. It's all through the jungles, and it twists around like a giant liana. It is a giant liana, and sometimes it looks more like a DNA strand, which is the basis of the Narby book. Anyway, these two plants are intermingling. One is eating the other. So that's what he experienced during a vision, and that metaphorically shows you the way the plants are interacting to become the brew that actually gives you the vision. So these works of art are complex and very interesting. And Pablo Amaringo talks about his creative process. There's a whole world of mythical beings that he sees, and so on. So the one thing that really relates to today, and then we're going to go into the past, was when Alejandro Toledo, who was the first indigenous person, the first indigenous guy to become a president of Peru in 2001, Alejandro Toledo. I met him. He's a very nice man. He went to Stanford. No dummy. That's him right there getting his inauguration. And he held his inauguration at Machu Picchu, very famous in the city. Very, very famous. I'll show you a picture of Machu Picchu even if you're talking about Argentina. It just equals South America. And it equals all the people in the past, even though it was the last 100 years before the spin. A very important place, but not the only one. Anyway, he held his inauguration at Machu Picchu, not in Lima, the Spanish city, not in a colonial city like Arequipa, at the top of the mountain in Machu Picchu. And they did all their normal, regular Western stuff, and he wore his suit. And then they turned the cameras off, and they went around, and let me read you. 2 barefoot priests wearing decorated red ponchos and white caps made of llama wool with the ear flaps called chuyos asked Mr. Toledo's permission to burn coca leaves, that's an important plant, llama fat, sugar, the grain quinoa, and flowers. While the priests were raising 2 bundles of offerings to the heavens and burning them out of sight of around 250 assembled guests, Mr. Toledo was presented with a golden necklace bearing the Inca cross, or chocana, and was handed a golden axe. The Inca cross is like a stepped diamond. It goes like that. So this event, I think, is a perfect and very self-conscious way of connecting the past and the present. So taking a bundle that involves different types of animal products, different parts of the world, and burning it is another thing that you do as an offering during shamanic rituals. It has been done since time immemorial. And the archaeologists find a heart in the middle of a site with little charred remains of all these same kinds of things that people have been doing for millennia. So that shows us that these things run very deep, and that on the most important and sacred of our Western traditional days, in Peru, there will often be also an homage to the past. So they are kind of like parallel. We think that one will always replace the other, but they manage to be blended together in a creative way and in a beautiful way. He got this red and white stripes, which is the flag of Peru, and he got the Inca symbol, which is the ruler. So let's go back. Let's go back to the moche. How many of you have ever heard of the moche? Oh, good. Good. Well, the moche, most people have really only heard of the Inca, and sometimes they think the Inca are in Mexico, not Peru. But on the north coast of Peru, you can see this red line, which kind of outlines on the north coast. Kind of chopped off a little bit up there. But north of Lima was the moche state. All along here. This bump is the bump between Peru and Ecuador. They built incredible adobe pyramids. This is a detail of what we call the Pyramid of the Sun at the Moche capital, which is creatively called Moche. And this pyramid had over 100 million adobe bricks. The largest adobe structure in the Americas, 21 stories tall in a melted form. 21 stories of solid mud bricks, each of which, as far as we can tell, now we haven't looked at each one of them, each of them that we've seen has little marks on it that show which group of people made it, little geometric marks like dominoes. And there are sections that are the contributions of different groups of people to this giant building, on which on the top was a temple where they did the same kinds of rituals and basic kinds of rituals as President Toledo. And this is a mannequin dressed up in a version of all the clothes that were found on the most important person, who's called the Lord of Sipan, S-I-P-A-N. If you want a really interesting archaeological tale, go to National Geographic starting in 1988 and just look in the index for the site of Sipan, S-I-P-A-N. And you'll see about the archaeologists who, for once, beat out the looters and got to his grave. The looters were within about 6 feet of his grave, but the archaeologists had a shootout on the top of the site, saving these graves. And they have been excavated, and it's a wonderful also story of North American, U.S., and Peruvian archaeologists working together with the National Geographic to save the site and build a museum at the site and bring the objects around the United States. It's the perfect story of international cooperation. Anyway, this is to show you that this was a great and powerful state that could command millions of hours of labor and was ruled by a man covered in sparkling gold, a crescent headdress, and so on. It's a marvelous civilization, and I'm glad that some of you have heard about it. We have portrait head pots of lots of different people, so we can get a sense of what the moche looked like. A lot of times you don't have a sense of the physiognomy of people because in the ancient American art, they're not quite so concerned about what everybody looks like usually. But in this civilization, they are. This guy's eyes are a little crooked. This guy's nice and chubby. This guy's kind of aquiline. This is a handsome, cool, very handsome guy. Chubby was actually really good in the past. Because if you're chubby, you have plenty to eat and somebody else is feeding you. So it's high status. High status. Remember that. Anyway, this is just to show you that there are lots of people with fancy headdresses. This guy has an animal headdress on his head. Fancy nose ring. They've got fancy earrings on. And that handsome guy has some thing coming out of his head. So even when they're just sort of portraits of people, and this is Jose and this is Sergio, it's what's coming out of his head there. So we see portraits of individuals who were very important people. There's a great book on these Moche portrait heads by a man named Christopher Donnan, D-O-N-N-A-N. Beautiful book. There are about 750 of these portrait head pots of people. This guy, he's got puffy eyelids. Can you see that it's the same guy as in this pot? Sometimes they're portraits of his head. Sometimes they're portraits of his body. Sometimes he looks younger. He looks older. There are about 30 different portraits of this exact guy. And there's one guy that there's 45 portraits of from age 10 to about age 50. He had cut on his lip. We call him cut lip. This guy we call puffy eyes. Anyway, he's wearing, besides his puffy eyes, his face paint that's got lines through his eyes. And in this one, he's sitting with his hands on his knees. Sometimes people call that the Indian pose, cross-legged with your hands on your knees. That is actually the pose of meditation in ancient American art. Not a neutral pose. And any of you do yoga? The lotus position? Probably also came over to Bering Strait with those people. Maybe, maybe not, but it's basically the same position. You're not seeing his crisscross legs, but if you come down to the Carlos Museum, you'll see several with the actual one foot up on top of the other. So he's not sitting in a neutral pose. This is a shaman's pose, and he's got a headdress that's a cowl all the way around his head. This is an important little clue. There are various clues that people are shamans in ancient art, and you'll see why. He also, it's a he, but he is dressed in a long dress like a woman. So, this is not relate to the people outside this building who are having their fun, who are loud. Shamans will often cross gender. Gender is your social role in society, not your physical, human, biological characteristics. They will cross gender, and a man might wear a woman's dress, or a woman might have big, giant shoulders in the pictures of them. Because the shaman is basically beyond those petty differences between boys and girls and whatever the civilization is. They're supposed to really have both, because they're in charge of fertility. And we all know that fertility has both. So, interestingly enough, he is dressed as a woman. So he can have the power of both the male and the female. Now this is the pot that I showed you at the beginning from Harvard. You see the cowl? This is a long cowl, not the short one. This is the winter version. But, this is her cowl, and she has on a long dress, and we have no indication that she's male. So look at her face. What kind of animal is she manifesting? An owl, that's right. Big round eyes and the short hooked beak. So this is a woman who is transforming into her owl self in order to cure. She has her patient, this is a bad photograph of the guy right here, who's next to her, lying down, that's her patient. Now, one of the interesting things that's still true in Peru today is that both the shaman and the client take the entheogenic substance. It's like if you went to the doctor and he gave you an antibiotic, and he took it too. Okay? But that's because in in shamanism, the curing takes place, like everything else, out there as a spiritual thing. So the client gets out of their terrestrial body, which is the one that's the problem, and the shaman gets out of his or her body in this case, and all the good stuff happens when you're not down here where the problems are. That's extremely simplified, but that's basically the concept. So again, it's not literal. It's not, I'm doing this to you and making you better. You both have to be transformed for change to happen. Shamanism is all about change. And how does change happen? You can't just lie there on the bed. Nothing's going to change. So one of the things that you're seeing here, notice anything funny about this guy? Got crossed fangs of a jaguar. The jaguar's canines cross. They're 2 inches long, and they crisscross like that. So that's showing that he's transformed into his animal self. And that's a big thing in shamanism, is that everybody in this room has at least one animal self. It's not a pet, not like my nice pit bull that I left at home. Come talk to you. Don't take your animal self on a walk. You turn into it during your visionary state. And let me tell you that's why my book is called The Jaguar Within. It's not as if I turned into a jaguar, or would that I would turn into a jaguar. There's no subjunctive here. There is the experience that you have become a jaguar. And this is trying to show us his experiences that he's in his jaguar self. He's an important guy, and he has on an important fancy headdress. And the painted one up above him, right here, that's the crescent. Remember the Lord of Sipan had a crescent on the top of his head? And this is like a warrior's cap with the crescent on the top. That swirly pattern is always worn by warriors. So he's taken off his fancy warrior cap, he's turned into his jaguar self, and he's sprouted into sort of a jaguar face. And you see it three-dimensionally on his face. That's what all the clues are. And he's under a special blanket, kind of like stars probably, to indicate he's up there. So here's the transformed female shaman. And let me just, as an aside, can be just as easily, you're welcome, just as easily a woman or a man. The Moche were very patriarchal. But if you get the visions, if you can cure someone, if I lay my hands on you and you get better, you've got the power. So it doesn't matter if you're male or female. And that makes a very interesting situation where women have spiritual power when they don't have a whole lot of political power, but they kind of intermingle. And the Lord of Sipan is shown in different pictures as the most important person, but there's also the number 3 person is a priestess in the Moche culture. And we found a whole city where it's dedicated to the priestess, called San Jose de Moro now. So there's a priestess city. So even it infiltrates into the political, religious hierarchy. Okay, so Eduardo was shown a picture of this pot before he died, and he said, oh yeah, okay, she's female, she's holding the tip of the San Pedro cactus, right, in her hand, this little lump that looks kind of pointed, tip of the San Pedro cactus. This is where the brew is. This is another entheogen called espingo seeds. Here's his headdress, here's this. These are little things that hold plants. See the little plants kind of coming off it? Can you see little plants coming off? He calls those seguros, purities, where you have special plants that are steeped in perfume. Shamanism loves perfume and sweet things. The spirits love things that are sweet. And he said, well, you've got your yama over here, and you've got your bull roarer. A bull roarer, you go, woo, 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 like that. It calls spirits. He just pointed out what everything was. He said, oh yeah, we do all that stuff. And this is from 300 AD. 300. So 1700 years. And I'll show you some of those stuff that he pointed out. Here's the San Pedro cactus, Trichocereus pachinoi. Here it is growing on the sides of the mountains. It's a tall columnar cactus. Here it is in a market in Trujillo. You can buy this 5 pounds. It's about 3% mescaline, and it's got a lot of other stuff in it. And the tip is this part right here. It's the growing edge, and it has a concentration of the entheogen in the tip. So it is the best part, the most visionary part. So she's holding that little tip in her hand. And here's another view of it to show you the type of cactus it is. I could give you an entire lecture on all the images of this cactus in ancient art from Peru. But I won't. Here are the espingo seeds. See the little seeds? They're like little almond shapes with a little slit down the middle of them. Let's go back so you can see them. See, they're on strings, and they have a little slit, and they're kind of almond shaped. Also on sale for the low, low price of $19.95. There they are strung up. There's a guy holding them. You might think they were bananas or something if you didn't know. Bananas were introduced later. These are two pieces in our collection. This guy, he looks like he's wearing just a necklace, but they're made of espingo seeds. And this person is holding up two strings of espingo seeds. So these images of entheans are all through the art. All through the art. And these are important people with fancy earrings on. The men in the Americas wear the fancy jewelry. Big old earrings. We have some at the Carlos Museum that are 4 inches around on the front, and a 2-inch post that goes through your ear. That was a very important person. Very short earring. So there's a lot of moche scenes of curing. See the cowl? She's wearing the cowl. She's putting her hand on the person who's got their eyes closed. We might think that whenever eyes are closed, you're dead or you're asleep. But in trances, the shamans tell us that if their eyes are closed, they can see the other side better. Because trance state is not being unconscious. It's dual consciousness. Very important in the Americas. You're not just dead to the world and then you come back and say, what happened? You are dual consciousness. So if I were a shaman, I would be seeing all of you, and I'd be seeing a purple dragon in the corner at the same time. If I close my eyes, I can see the purple dragon better. So this isn't just, it's a sick person, but it also is a little clue that she's also in a trance. She has on a cowl, so it's a woman curing another woman. Maybe she's curing another shaman. Like doctors cure each other, and massage therapists give each other nice massages. She's also putting a gesture towards her mouth. One of the ancient and continuing gestures is that you pluck the disease out of the body, and the shaman will ingest it in some way and just release it through their body because they're more powerful. Or there's also blowing. They'll blow on your fontanelle. They'll blow on a part of your body that's sick. Or they will put their mouth on it and suck the disease out of your body. And then they'll maybe throw up or spit whatever it is out. So that gesture is well understood. Here's another one with the person prone, and it's almost like the person is praying over them. So there are universal gestures. There are lots of these curing scenes that show us exactly what the people did. This is one I just found, which is really beautiful, of a man. Can you see him? He's pushing his leg against the woman. He's bracing. He's holding her by the side. She has a little baby on her back. And he's maybe pulling something out of her ear, or it's kind of complicated. But look at his hands. He's not in his human self. He's in his more powerful animal self. That's one of the ways in which shamanism is diametrically opposed to Christianity, is that animals are not separate or lesser. Page 2 of the Bible says dominate the animals of the plains and dominate. That's the opposite of this. You want to be a jaguar. That is your goal. So that's why Kobo thought that these people were superstitious. Why would you know? You don't want an animal. That's to us an insult. To a Native American, that's compliment. So this is a beautiful scene, and look at 2 snakes. You see the snakes coming off of his belt. There's almost always snakes. Snakes are seen and experienced in almost every vision that anybody has. That's why Narby named his book The Cosmic Serpent. So here are a couple of pieces. This is the one on the cover of my book. It's at the Carlos, and this is at the Carlos too. This is an ocelot, not a jaguar. This is kind of funny because my book's called The Jaguar Within, and he's an ocelot. But close. Ocelot because of these wavy, open markings, like the ones here. A naturalist called an ocelot looked like someone had painted his stripes on, or painted his spots on as the cat was running by very quickly. Woo! So, ocelots are smaller than jaguars, but they have pretty much all the same characteristics. So that you can have any animal. Your animal self could be an ant. And that wouldn't be bad. Because ants can build huge things. And, leafcutter ants, have you ever seen a leafcutter ant with the equivalent of a parasail, on their back? Any animal that you experience in your dreams, in your visions, that comes to you, or even that alights on you. Are you a person that the butterflies come and alight on? That would be your animal vibe right there. So these are pieces that are ocelots, because they have the open stripes, the open markings. Okay. Here's a cool pot. It's a bad photograph, but it's a cool pot. These are two different sides of it. Can you see the more human and the more cat? Made out of the same parts. This side, there's only 4 eyes altogether. This is the eyes and the cross veins and a human nose. When you look at it this way, when you look at it that way, the eyes are way to the side. There's a cat nose, and the mouth is a cat mouth. It's an optical illusion. There's the human, but it's still got cat in it, and the cat. And you turn it around, and it changes from one to the other. This is like TV 1,500 years ago. Computer. So the two selves are within one another. It's very hard for us to grasp. We think it's some kind of a trick, or it's not true. We want it to be resolvable in regular terrestrial time. But if you just think about that it happens during the vision, and let me read you a woman who talked about her vision. I wasn't a fish anymore, but a big cat, a tiger. I walked feeling the same freedom I had experienced as a bird and a fish. A freedom of movement, flexibility, grace. I moved as a tiger in the jungle, joyously feeling the ground under my feet, feeling my power. My chest grew larger. I then approached an animal, any animal. I only saw its neck and experienced what a tiger feels when looking at its prey. We don't usually go around looking at people's necks, do we? You have a particularly delicious-looking neck. And that's exactly how tigers kill. They break the neck. Jaguars crush your skull. So she was specifically seeing a tiger. You can say, okay, she studied all about tigers, and so when she had a vision, that's how she already knew that. Maybe, maybe not. Doesn't matter. She had the experience, the specific experience of that animal. Changed her perception. And that's what we have to understand. That this is trying to tell us, I have the teeth of the cat. I open my mouth in the same way as the cat. My eyes are to the side of my head more than when I'm human. This is trying to communicate a completely different perspective that you get during a vision. And I'll end with this piece, but this is one of the weird and wonderful pieces that I think directly illustrates visionary experience. Okay, what's strange about this piece? There are eyes everywhere. There are eyes popping out of the temples. There's the regular eyes. There's eyeballs all around the back of the head. There's 3 on the top of the head. The biggest one is right here on the fontanelle. Where are there some other heads that are, eyes that are weird? The bottom edge of the nose has been converted into an eye. And the mouth is an eye. Okay. There's something called synesthesia that happens. Are you a synesthete? Anybody? This can happen to you during regular life. And a lot of artists are synesthetes. What it means is your senses cross over. You can see the color. You don't just see the color green, you can smell the color green. You can hear the color green. Every time you see green, you hear a C. denote C on the scale. Every time you see ripples of a certain kind, you hear violins. It's some kind of crisscrossing of the wires in here, but it's very powerful, and it happens all the time during visions and only sometimes during daily life. If you're falling asleep or waking up, sometimes you have these kind of crisscrossy things. Anyway, about 6% of the population have it. So, let's see. A nose that's an eye, seeing what you smell. A smell turns into something visual. I smell cinnamon and I see purple. And these things are very specific and they don't change. Synesthetes say, I always see purple. I don't just see any color. Cinnamon, purple. And then the mouth, I taste what I see what I'm tasting, or you can make noise with your mouth like I am. And it is still visual. So this, I think, is not only having extra sight, eyes everywhere, but it's eyes and visual that turns into other senses. And it's directly synesthetic. Next fall, I hope we're going to have this artist come and speak at Emory, and I hope you'll come to listen to her. Name is Marcia Smilak. And she wrote me an email. I said, just please give me a quote from my book about, can you explain synesthesia to the rest of us? And she said, one of the hardest things to explain to non-synesthetes, that's what you're called, is how my outer eyes have nothing to do with what I see. Instead of asking me, what do you see, an interviewer should ask me, where do I see it? Because once people realize that the synesthetic visions are not seen with the outer eyes, they begin to understand a little about how it works internally. So these eyes that are popping out, and look how they actually sort of pop out and interrupt his headband. They're kind of coming from the inside. They're not just like laid on the top, like they glued some eyeballs. They're kind of coming from inside out. This inner vision. It doesn't have a location terrestrially. Okay? I'm leaving you with a bit of a Zen paradox, seeing without having the eyes in the terrestrial. But a piece like this, which is moche, which is a portrait head of somebody important, right? These were important people that got their portraits taken. And this is what they're trying to show their experience and how different it is from regular experience. Okay, we have time for questions. You all go till 1:15 if you're in the class. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have or comments. I have had visions without entheogens when I went to Ecuador. Yes, I was in the presence of sacred petroglyphs, sacred boulders, and I'd been on a long hike, and I suddenly started feeling very bad, and the shaman gave me a healing just with leaves. They hit you with leaves and blow on you with tobacco and things like that. I started feeling better, and he sent me to my tent and said, you have some visions to figure out why you are carrying the sadness of all women. I was like, dang! I wish I weren't carrying the sadness of all women. Let's let everybody leave, and then I'll finish telling the story. And I'll get a drink of water. I want to finish the story. So, what was interesting was that about 4 days before, we had gone to the shaman that had the shrine. Go ahead. The shrine to Jesus. And they looked at me and did all their different stuff, and they said, you're carrying the sadness of all women. Word for word. 2 shamans did not know each other. Highland, lowland, 5 hours away. I said, what the hell is it? What the heck is it with the sadness of all women stuff? And, well, he said, go have your visions because you can figure it out. And I lay there all afternoon, and I'm talking about a dual consciousness because I knew who was playing Uno, who was swimming in the little creek, and at the same time I was seeing a sister that I had in the womb who died. And I was able to send her to the other side with the help of this shaman. And that was where my sadness came from, the deep sadness and that loss. And after that, I mean, I wouldn't have said I was a sad person walking along carrying all women's sadness, but the loss of a sister, a female thing. And I also saw the souls of all the lost babies. And Augustine came into my vision. This was wonderful. It went on for hours, and I remember every little detail of it. He scooped them up and put them in my grandmother's thimble. And we carried them up to the hole in the sky and released them. And it was like, okay, I get it. And I felt wonderful for 6 weeks. And there was no medicine involved whatsoever. So I think it's very powerful, and I think it manifests differently, for different people. But I think if you're open to it, but I didn't do this on purpose. I was just there, to learn from him, not to have this experience. And afterwards he said, well, you've got to come back, because the rocks gave you this. And so I came back and did research with him, and it was very special, very important. So anyway. I'm a raven. Yeah. I was in Yellowstone with a Shoshone shaman friend of mine, and he said, he didn't say anything. We were walking around, and all day we saw ravens. I was like, what is it with the ravens? He said, well, they come first. And I kept hearing raven fire. At the end of the day, I said, Blue Thunder, does raven fire mean something? I don't know a lot about this. He said, no, that's your name. They were giving you your name, silly. And he said, the raven comes first. It comes with messages from the other side and brings messages between the worlds. So I feel like I talk about shamanism. I go to the jungle and I talk to you all, and I stand in between like a raven. And he said, well, then tomorrow we'll see hawk, because after the raven has come, then the hawk comes. Never saw a raven again. Hawk after hawk after hawk. I was like, okay, thank you. So, I'm a white girl with blue eyes, but my name is Ravenfire. What can you do? Anything else? There's a very set series of things. One of them would be having big dreams. Those of you that dream in color, those of you that have ever dreamt about something that then took place, or you were able to change something in a dream, that would be one of the first ways, because they don't make a distinction between dreams and visions. Was I dreaming? I was hearing the Uno game, but I was somewhere in that netherworld. So that is the dream time, if you've heard of the Australian Aborigines dream time. And most cultures believe that dream time is just as important as non-dream time. So that already, if you just have a big dream, you talk to the dead in your dream, an animal comes and saves you. The second thing is getting sick and getting better. So we would say, okay, sometimes you get sick and then you get better. Well, you can even die and come back to life, have one of those near deaths. In shamanic logic, that means that you have a greater healing ability for yourself that you could then translate to other people. Kind of makes sense. You're good at something, you can teach someone about it, and then you can hand it on. But in theirs, it's more about energy. You have the energy not to die of this disease that kills everybody else. So you need to pass that on. You need to pay it forward. So those are two of the main ways. Another shaman can dream about you and say, I've seen you before. I've dreamt about you. You're supposed to be a shaman. And a lot of times you don't want to be a shaman. There's another gringo. His name is Duncan. I'll tell you. We have time? We have time for this story. This is when shamanism entered my life. Duncan, the shaman, because like the fact that you can be a woman or a man, you can look like me and become a shaman if you have these signs. If I went down to Ecuador and I survived a great disease and I had a dream and Don Augustine dreamt about me, hey, sorry, you've got to do it. So Duncan was this gringo down with the Maya doing his dissertation on kinship diagrams. Anybody taking up for a 101? With all the little triangles and squares of who's related to who? Whew. That's why I'm not an anthropologist. he was down there studying the Maya, and he got sick and got better. And then he came forward one morning with his dream, because in a Maya village you tell your dream every morning, because dream time is just as important as non-dream time. And his dream was he was sitting at a table with 12 skeletons, and they were imparting their wisdom to him. And when they finished telling him all the stuff he needed to know, the ceiling opened up to reveal that the sky was one entire giant star. So he comes up with this, and everybody goes, "Oh, okay, you have to be a shaman." He says, "No, I have to write a dissertation." "No, you have to be a shaman." And they said, "We're not going to tell you who's related to whom if you don't go become a shaman." So they blackmailed him. He's like, "Ah!" And so he had to stay up all night, and he had to take these plant teachers, and he had to learn the calendrics and do all this stuff. And he became a shaman. So this Mr. Duncan comes to Emory in 1993 to give a talk on the Maya. And I'm his host, like Dan, the rest of be nice to me while I'm here. And I was nice to Duncan. And I brought him, in his lecture, he came out as a shaman. He told about this experience, and I said, "Well, when did this happen? This happened, you were in grad school a long time ago." He said, "Yeah, it was 13 years ago. When I was made an official Maya shaman, they told me, your challenge is you can't tell anyone for 13 years. You tell a gringo academic they can't talk about something for 13 years? So this was the end of the 13 years, and he told his experience, and everybody went, "Oh, that's so cool." So I bring him home. I have a little boy named Dylan. I'm sorry, everything starts with a D. Dylan, and a husband named Doug. And Dylan has just started going to daycare. So he knows that when he wants to speak, he has to go like this. So we had tea, and my ex-husband said to Duncan, "Oh, what did you talk about?" And Duncan starts telling the story, and he gets into the dream, and he gets to the part where the dad is talking to him, and Dylan starts going, And Duncan says, "Yes, Dylan?" And Dylan says, "And then open a big, big star." And Duncan was like, "Yeah, that's right, Dylan." And Doug was like, "What?" And I was like, "Oh my God." So, okay, that's a nonlinear experience, and it came into my dining room. So that's where it kind of infiltrates this combination of the dreams and so on. And I said to Duncan, my little son has talked about a wolf in his dreams, a friendly wolf that helps him. A little baby boy. And so Duncan turned to Dylan and said, "What color is your friendly wolf, Dylan?" He said, "It's brown. It's kind of way brownish." And I said, "What does that mean?" And he said, "Well, if it had been a white wolf, that would be an indication that he had to be a shaman. But as it is, he's just a lucky little kid because he's got a wolf spirit." So, that was my Sunday afternoon. So watch out. If you get interested in shamanism, this kind of stuff could happen to you. One more question. Well, political things. They're definitely specialists. What we would call a midwife is a particular type of shaman because they're bringing spirits from the other side into this one. There's life and death involved. So we should change our categories a little bit. That's a category of shamanism for traditional cultures. Then there are people who are particularly good at going out of their body and talking to the Milky Way. And there are people that specialize, the Inca, there were people who specialized in setting bones. So to us, these might be medical specialties, but they use the same words and terminology as shamans because you're going in and manipulating the body. But there was definitely the people who sort of cure ills, and then the people who have the visions that predict the future are kind of on a power hierarchy, not an official hierarchy, but a power hierarchy. So there's something that you might be particularly good at. So there's definitely specialties. Augustine, that I worked with in Ecuador, he works on women's problems. He's more of a gynecologist, obstetrician, shaman. So there's definitely specialties. When it gets political, The only thing that's kind of political is that there's an association of shamans in Ecuador particularly, and they meet together. They have committee meetings, and you can get insurance to reimburse you for going to the shamans that are in that association because it's considered a parallel path. So, and in Peru, a medical doctor will go to a shaman if they get sick and the other doctors can't cure them. So there's an interchangeability between the two systems, which I think is kind of political. And what this association of shamans, I have 30 more seconds, said, in 1992, all these shamans in South America, including Peru, started sharing with each other the dream that they were having, which was that a condor, the South American bird, and an eagle, the North American bird, were flying together, a pair of birds. That's why Augustine talks to me now, because it was ordained, and this was a group vision, a very non-linear thing, that the eagles and the condors were supposed to interchange information. It also helped that Emery's totem animal is an eagle. So we are doing this now because we're knowing about it more because they are consciously telling us. So it's a new age for them. It's an exciting time, and I thank you very much.